Hey everyone, Brendan Sander here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the brand new Bruce Springsteen Nebraska 82, the expanded edition, new box set. This was his sixth solo album at the time, but now expanded to a 5-disc box set, just coming out on October 24th of 2025. Going to do a full review, full unboxing, get into this whole thing, explain what it is that this is all about and why it's a very cool thing. We'll get into it here in just a bit, but before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool things like this, talking about the brand new Bruce Springsteen Nebraska 82 Expanded Edition. So, Nebraska, released in 1982, but was recorded between two of Bruce's most successful albums. The River from 1980, which would go on to sell 5 million copies in the US, and of course, Born in the USA, 1984, 17 million copies sold in the US, and definitely Bruce's biggest album. So the album itself was recorded solo and unaccompanied, and this being without his famous backing band, the E Street Band. The recordings are sparse. They were recorded on a 4-track, and they were recorded in his bedroom in his New Jersey home at the time. And they were meant to be later fleshed out with the E Street Band. 8 songs would later be re-recorded with the band itself, but just not having the feeling of those original demos, the demos were released instead. And so the album, not as successful as The River or Born in the USA and even some of the other ones, it would go on to sell 1 million copies. But the story of the album, how it came about, bucking the system, releasing these unpolished demos at the height of his career, and instead not making the next big E Street Band album was just something that was unexpected. And the behind the scenes of all of that has sort of grown into mythical proportions, so much so that there's now a major motion picture about it called Springsteen Deliver Me from Nowhere, starring in-demand actor Jeremy Allen White. So totally not unsurprising then that we would get this deluxe edition of the album itself. It's a great way to tie into the movie, to promote the movie, but also to get some promotion from the movie to this, since the soundtrack of the film is sung by Jeremy Allen White. It's not a Bruce Springsteen filled soundtrack the way you would typically expect it to be. So this has kind of become the unofficial soundtrack to that movie that is out. So let's talk about this thing now. 5 discs in all are included. 4 CDs, 1 Blu-ray, featuring 37 tracks, which doesn't sound like a lot on here, especially for a 5-disc box set. But it's the songs themselves that really make it worthwhile. Now, the sequence of the discs in here are also not typical to the way deluxe editions are normally done. Usually in a deluxe edition, you would get the primary album itself first. That is what people are interested in. So you'd get that, and then you'd get all this bonus content coming thereafter. But in this particular case, it's done differently. Disc 1, which is a CD, is Nebraska Outtakes, 9 additional acoustic tracks that didn't make the album. Disc 2 is a CD, and it's Electric Nebraska. That's the one that was recorded with the E Street Band. It's also that Holy Grail album that so many Springsteen fans have wanted for so long, and that is right up front and one of the key things that is making this box set so enjoyable for people. Disc 3 is the Blu-ray, and it's Nebraska Live. It's a video of Bruce recording this very sparsely in a theater. Disc 4 CD is Nebraska Live, the audio of it, which is interesting that the audio isn't before the video. So I think the real thing here is the outtakes, the electric version, and that video. And then they throw in a live audio too in here just to get you an extra disc. And then also disc 5, the last disc in this box set, is the remastered album. And it is a 2025 remastering of the album, but it's the last disc in here. Again, I think really showing that it is the content of this box set that is what is important, and not so much the album itself that we all know and love already. So let's talk about those now. So disc 1 that's in here, the Nebraska outtakes. As I mentioned, 9 outtakes that didn't make the final album. Few of them have been released as B-sides or as part of the box set tracks from 1998. But this is the first time they've all been collected together like this and presented to give us this alternate opinion, alternate edition of the Nebraska album, right? This very much could have been the songs that were selected as opposed to the 10 songs that we got. We could have been getting this. So I really like this presentation and how they're doing it. Like the original album, these are, of course, acoustic, recorded on 4-track. They're very sparse in nature, like the original album. Some of my favorite standout tracks from these, track number 2, Losing Kind, is probably my favorite of all the tracks on there. It easily could have appeared on the album itself. Number 3, Downbound Train, is a really kind of a ruckus, upbeat number that, again, I think could have made the original album itself pop a bit more. And then track 5, Pink Cadillac, which would later be a B-side, and there is a version of that that's on tracks, but this one here is that acoustic rendition. It's very different from what would become that B-side track. It was actually a very popular track, almost as popular as any album track at the time. I remember later working in record stores where people would come in asking for that song and having to say it's not on an album. So next we've got Electric Nebraska. And this one here has 8 tracks on it. 6 of the songs would turn up on the final album, but 2 of the songs didn't make the album itself and are done here. It opens very much like the album Nebraska, sparse sounding. There is full band that fleshes it out, but it stays very subtle. And so the title track does open the album. But when we kick in with track 2, Atlantic City, which is the same as the original album, that's where it really announces itself as something different. This full-on electric, over-the-top E Street Band rendition of it is just absolutely fantastic. Additionally, lyrically, it's different from the original classic. So where the original song sings, "I've got debts no honest man can pay," and for whatever reason, that lyric always stood out to me, is later moved and sung as part of Johnny 99 in that version on Electric Nebraska. The lyric that replaces it in Atlantic City is, I got into deep and could not pay. So that right there in and of itself, the alternate lyrics that you hear throughout some of these songs, is also just another way that the Electric Nebraska songs change from their original ones. And it just makes it feel like something more than it is. It's not just a band that came in and fleshed it out electrically. These are different renditions of them. And I happen to really like this version of the album, very much so, with those alternate songs. It feels more like an E Street Band album, not just because they're there, but when you think about the album that came before it with The River, and you think about where Bruce Springsteen was going, Born in the USA, this version, when you hear it, you go, oh, I can see it. I can feel where that was. But taking that away, it's a big jump to go from The River to Born in the USA. But obviously we have found between this release now and, of course, tracks 2, Lost Albums, where there is the Garage Sessions 83 or LA Garage Sessions 83 that was happening in tandem. Those things are now finally telling a full picture of what Bruce was going through in between those two albums. But this here is really starting to paint that picture, and for me at least, is one of the reasons that I'm loving it so much. We then get Nebraska live, and it was recorded in 2025 at the Count Basie Theater in Red Bank, New Jersey. And again, featuring very sparse recordings like the originals, with only minor accompaniment in there, the occasional guitar or background vocal on it. There's no audience there. So he's recorded in a theater instead of his bedroom. It's got far better sound than the original because of it being in the theater, and of course, recording technology today far better. And it's not recorded on a 4-track that, believe it or not, that along with Bruce's lifetime of experience being added to the vocal performance of these songs, I personally feel that this live rendition is the definitive version of the album Nebraska. I do love the original, but it always sounded like a demo. It always sounded a bit unfinished for me. And this here sounds like it is a finished version of it. And I always kind of wonder why at the time they didn't try something like that. If you want to keep it sparse, why go with the demos? Why not go record it properly, better in a theater, live like that? Maybe that was just only something they came up with now, but very cool nonetheless to get that version of it. And then, of course, we get Nebraska Remastered, and it is a new 2025 remastering of the album. But how much can you really do with an original 4-track demo recording from 1982? So it really ends up sounding pretty much the same as the previous remastered version of it. And so, as I said, I really feel like the live 2025 version, which now pops, and that's what I would have liked to have heard from the remastered edition, doesn't do that. So leaving the 2025 version as the stronger one, in my opinion. And I can see why the original album itself is now the last disc in this collection here. So let's take a look at this. It is bigger than a CD size, and it's in a book version of this, so it's not a box per se, but because there's 5 discs, I still count this as a box set. We get the same album art. They're not changing any of that. And as you saw when I flipped it over, they just name the albums themselves that are included in here, and they do list Blu-ray and audio for that one there, which is why you only see 4 things, though there are 5 discs in here. And so when we open this up, we get the discs like this, and so you get Nebraska Outtakes and Electric Nebraska right up front, the 2 key things that are in here, and then we start getting into some of the, quote, story time in here, which is very cool, getting to hear Bruce's impressions of the thing now and seeing some of these outtake photos and stuff like that in here. There's not too much in it, but it does go into what he was going through and what it was that wasn't working about the E Street Band performances and whatnot. I would have liked a little bit of more stuff in here about the other recordings and things that are in this, but we do get the additional information and lyrical content of the outtakes and stuff, and so you do get that in here. But all in all, the rest of this stuff is pretty much lyrics and where things were recorded, with some cool photos and stuff that's in here. Cool nonetheless. Now in the back, we get the Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray comes in its own sleeve. And I kind of wonder why that is, although maybe for the LP edition, they had it in a sleeve and decided, why not? Let's do that also for this. But as I said, I think this was meant to be a real feature and not like an afterthought in here. Whereas the audio version is here and then the remaster being the last thing in here. So there you go. That is the box set as a whole. And bottom line on this, I mentioned it earlier, I sort of always felt something was missing from the original rendition. And I knew that they were demos, but I just felt that there could have been something more with it. And so knowing that Bruce wasn't happy with those alternate versions of things, it's always left this sort of idea in my mind that there were this other way to hear, to experience the album. And we're now finally getting that, and I'm shocked that we're getting it here 43 years on from the original album itself. Not knowing why it's taken as long as it has, except that Bruce initially didn't want to release these other versions because he felt those demos were the version that he wanted to present. And of course, in his older age and putting things together like Tracks and Tracks 2, the Lost Albums, I wondered why this wasn't included within it and feared we may never get it. And I talked a bit about that at the time when I did my full review of the Tracks 2 box set. I am glad that I was completely wrong, and the fact that they were being held out for this, a deluxe edition of the album. I speculated at the time and said, I didn't see this happening because the album only sold 1 million copies. But knowing now that the movie itself, Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere, chronicles that time between The River and Born in the USA and the things he was struggling with in terms of being popular and what to do next and who he was and the celebrity of it all now makes a lot more sense that he held it back in order to release in tandem with the movie as sort of an alternate soundtrack to get that sort of understanding for what this album is. And I now feel that this version of it with all the extra stuff that in here is actually essential for Bruce Springsteen fans, making it highly recommended that this isn't just throwaway stuff. This is a whole other way to hear the album as well as to hear an alternate version of what the album could have been with those 9 outtakes on it. So even though it's only 37 tracks, the 37 tracks that are included in here, the 9 outtakes, the 8 electric versions, and the 10 versions done live, I feel are absolutely, hands down, totally worth the price of admission for this. And there you go. That is my review for the new Bruce Springsteen Nebraska 82 Expanded Edition box set. Weigh in. Let me know your thoughts. Are you guys excited with what you've heard on here? Did the electric versions live up to the hype of the last 43 years on it? What about those acoustic outtakes that didn't make the album? Any of those should have been on the album in place of something else? I don't know. We could debate this endlessly, I'm quite sure. But all in all, great box set. Do check it out.